My daughter showed up at my door with a SWAT team this morning, claiming I kidnapped her kids, the same kids she dumped on me 12 years ago and never looked back. But when that judge saw what I pulled out of my evidence folder, his face went white as a ghost. My name is Carl Thompson. I'm 62 years old, and up until 6 months ago, I thought I knew what betrayal looked like. I spent 30 years as a detective, saw every kind of family mess you can imagine. But nothing prepared me for the day my own daughter would try to destroy me for money. It started 12 years ago when Patty was 23, struggling through her final year of law school with 3 babies under 5 years old. She'd had them young, Bradley when she was 18, Linda at 20, Dennis at 22. Their father Terry had just died in a motorcycle accident, and Patty was drowning between law school finals, student loans, and 3 crying kids. "Dad, I just need a few months," she said, standing in my kitchen with 3 exhausted children and 2 garbage bags of clothes, just until I graduate and get established at a firm. I can't do this alone. I looked at those babies and saw my late wife's eyes staring back at me. Margaret had been gone 15 years by then, killed by a drunk driver when Patty was in high school. I'd already raised 1 kid alone after that tragedy. What was 3 more? "Of course, honey," I said, kneeling down to Bradley's level. The 5-year-old was trying not to cry, being brave for his little brother and sister. "Take all the time you need." That was the last real conversation we had for 12 years. I sold my house, the 4-bedroom where Margaret and I had planned to grow old, and bought a smaller place that fit my pension better. I traded my fishing boat for a minivan. I learned how to braid hair for Linda and throw a football with Bradley. I stayed up nights with Dennis when he had nightmares about his daddy's motorcycle. Patty graduated law school and sent a Christmas card that first year with a photo of her in cap and gown. "Thanks for everything, Dad. The kids are in good hands." After that, nothing. No calls, no visits, no birthday cards for the kids. They stopped asking about Mommy after year 3. The kids called me Grandpa Carl, but let's be honest, I was their dad in every way that mattered. I taught Bradley to drive in the high school parking lot. I walked Linda to her first day of middle school when the other moms made her feel awkward. I helped Dennis build a volcano for his science fair project that actually won first place. My pension from the police department was decent, $2,800 a month, but 3 teenagers are expensive. I picked up a part-time security job at the local mall just to keep up with school supplies, clothes, and sports equipment. Bradley played football and needed new cleats every season. Linda wanted to take violin lessons. Dennis was always outgrowing his jeans. The kids never complained, never asked for the fancy stuff their friends had. They were good kids. Bradley made honor roll every semester. Linda got into advanced placement classes. Dennis was already talking about wanting to be a scientist like his grandpa's old partner, Victor, who'd become something of an uncle figure to them. Then 6 months ago, everything changed. Terry Mitchell, the kid's biological father, turned out to be more than just some guy who rode motorcycles and worked construction. His father owned a small oil company, and when the old man died last year, Terry inherited a trust fund. Problem was, Terry died before he could claim it. That meant it went to his kids, my grandkids. $8.5 million. That's what the lawyer's letter said. I stared at that number for about an hour, sitting at my kitchen table while the kids were at school. The house was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator and the tick of Margaret's old wall clock. All I could think about was how Bradley needed new cleats for football season, and I'd been saving up for 3 months to afford the $120. I called the law firm to make sure it wasn't a scam. It wasn't. The money was real, sitting in an account somewhere, waiting for the probate court to decide who would manage it until the kids turned 21. The guardian would get $200,000 a year to manage the children's needs and provide appropriate living arrangements. I didn't want the money for myself. Hell, I'd been managing just fine on my pension and security job. I wanted to make sure the kids got college paid for, maybe buy them each a decent car when they graduated. Set them up for life the way their biological parents never could. That's when Patty showed up. I was making breakfast, scrambled eggs with cheese, just the way Dennis likes them, when the front door exploded, and I mean exploded. 1 second I'm flipping eggs and humming along to the radio. The next second, there are guys in tactical gear with police emblazoned across their chests, screaming at me to get on the ground. Hands, where we can see them. Now get down! I dropped the spatula. My first thought wasn't for myself. It was for the kids. Bradley came running out of his room in his boxers and a t-shirt, ready to fight whoever was hurting his grandfather. Linda was screaming from her doorway. Dennis was crying, confused and terrified. "Don't hurt them," I yelled as they shoved me to the floor, my bad knee hitting the linoleum hard. "There are children in the house." The cold metal of handcuffs bit into my wrists. I could taste blood where my lip had split when they tackled me. But all I could think about was protecting those kids from whatever nightmare was unfolding in our kitchen. Then I saw her. Patty walked through my broken front door like she owned the place. But this wasn't the stressed-out law student who'd left 3 babies on my doorstep 12 years ago. This woman wore a designer coat that probably cost more than my monthly pension. Her hair was perfect, styled at some expensive salon. Her makeup was flawless, like she'd just stepped out of a magazine. She looked at me on the floor and smiled. Not a happy smile, a cold, calculating smile that made my blood run cold. "There he is, officer," she said, pointing at me like I was some kind of monster. "That's the man who stole my children." Stole? I raised them. I fed them. I loved them when she was too busy climbing the corporate ladder to remember they existed. I taught Bradley to tie his shoes and helped Linda with her first book report. I was the one who rushed Dennis to the emergency room when he broke his arm falling off his bike. The cops dragged me out in handcuffs while my neighbors watched from their front yards. Mrs. Brooks from next door was covering her mouth in shock, her morning coffee forgotten in her hand. These people had watched me coach Little League and host birthday parties for 12 years. They'd seen me at every school play and parent-teacher conference. Now they were watching me treated like a kidnapper. As they shoved me into the police car, I looked back at the house. Patty had her arms around the kids for the cameras. That's right. There were photographers there, professional ones with expensive equipment. She'd turned my arrest into a media event. Reunited mother recovers stolen children. One of them was shouting into a microphone. Heroic woman finds babies taken by disturbed father-in-law. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tell them the truth. But the patrol car door slammed shut, and all I could do was watch my life fall apart through bulletproof glass. The holding cell smelled like disinfectant and despair. I sat on a metal bench, still wearing the handcuffs, trying to figure out what had just happened. How does a grandfather become a kidnapper overnight? How does 12 years of devoted parenting become a crime? A young public defender showed up after a few hours. Kid looked like he was fresh out of law school himself, nervous and sweating through his cheap suit. "Mr. Thompson," he said, shuffling papers like his life depended on it. "I'm your court-appointed attorney. The charges are pretty serious. Custodial interference, child endangerment, kidnapping in the first degree." Kidnapping? I couldn't wrap my head around it. She gave them to me. She begged me to take them. "Do you have any documentation of that arrangement? Any legal custody papers?" That was the problem. It had been family. You don't get custody papers when your daughter asks for help with her kids. You just help. You step up because that's what family does. It wasn't formal, I said. She was my daughter. She needed help. The kid's face fell. He could already see how this was going to play out in court. The bail hearing was a nightmare. Patty sat in the front row, wearing a simple black dress, looking like a grieving mother. She'd somehow managed to produce tears on command, dabbing her eyes with tissues while her expensive lawyer painted me as an unstable old man who'd manipulated his vulnerable daughter. "Your Honor," the lawyer said, his voice dripping with righteous indignation. "My client was barely more than a child herself when Mr. Thompson convinced her to abandon her parental responsibilities. She's spent 12 years searching for her babies, living in fear of this man's threats. Searching? She'd never made a single phone call, never sent a birthday card, never asked how they were doing in school or whether Dennis had gotten over his fear of thunderstorms. The defendant represents a clear and present danger to these children," the lawyer continued. "He's isolated them from their mother, filled their heads with lies, and threatened violence if she ever tried to reclaim them." Violence? The only violence in my house was when the boys wrestled over the TV remote, or when Linda got frustrated with her violin practice. Bail was set at $100,000. I didn't have $100,000. I had my pension, my part-time security job, and about $3,000 in savings that I'd been putting aside to help Bradley with college applications. My public defender looked at me with pity. "I'm sorry, Mr. Thompson. unless you can come up with the money, you'll have to stay in custody until trial. That's when my old detective instincts kicked in. Something about this whole situation stank worse than a week-old fish. Patty shows up the same month I get a letter about a multi-million-dollar trust fund. That's not a coincidence. That's a plan. I used my one phone call to reach Victor Hayes. Victor was my partner for 15 years before he retired and started doing private investigation work. If anyone could dig up dirt on Patty's sudden maternal instincts, it was Victor. "Carl, what the hell happened?" Victor's voice was rough from too many cigarettes and late nights staking out cheating husbands. "I need you to investigate my daughter," I said, keeping my voice low. The other inmates were listening, and in jail, information is currency. Your daughter, Patty, she's trying to take the kids, Vic. Right after they inherited $8.5 million from their biological father, I need to know what she's really after. There was silence on the other end, then, "Jesus, Carl, that's a lot of money. I'll start tonight." Victor called me back 3 days later with news that made my blood boil. I was still stuck in county lockup, sleeping on a thin mattress that smelled like industrial bleach and broken dreams. "Your daughter's in deep trouble, Carl. Gambling debts to some serious people. We're talking $85,000 to a casino in Atlantic City, plus another $35,000 to some loan sharks who don't send polite reminder letters." My hands were shaking as I held the phone. How long has this been going on? At least 2 years? Gets worse. She's been shopping around for high-priced custody lawyers for months, long before she filed the paperwork against you. This whole thing was planned. I felt sick. My own daughter had been plotting against me while I was helping Dennis with his algebra homework and cheering at Bradley's football games. "There's more," Victor continued. "I got access to some phone records. She's been in contact with that trust fund lawyer since February. This isn't about the kids, Carl. This is about the money. Can you prove it? I'm working on it. But Carl, you need to know. She's telling people you threatened her. Says you told her if she ever came back, you'd make sure she never saw the kids again. That's a lie. I know it is. But she's got witnesses. Or at least people willing to say they're witnesses. This is bigger than just a custody dispute. She's building a criminal case against you." After Victor hung up, I sat in my cell and thought about the Patty I used to know. The little girl who used to climb into bed with me and Margaret during thunderstorms. The teenager who cried when she got her first speeding ticket because she was afraid I'd be disappointed. The young woman who called me sobbing when she found out she was pregnant. The first time, scared but excited about becoming a mother. Where did that person go? When did my daughter become someone who could look at her own children and see dollar signs instead of the baby she used to rock to sleep? A week later, Victor came through with the breakthrough we needed. He'd managed to get close to one of Patty's friends from law school, a woman named Jennifer, who'd kept in touch over the years. "Carl, you need to hear this," Victor said during our next phone call. "I got Jennifer talking after a few drinks. Your daughter's been planning this for months. She knew about the inheritance before you did. How? She hired a private investigator to track down Terry's family after he died. Found out about the oil money, the trust fund, everything. She's been building a case to get custody ever since." My heart sank. This wasn't a desperate mother trying to reconnect with her children. This was a calculated business decision. There's more. Jennifer recorded a conversation with Patty last month. Want to hear it? I closed my eyes. Play it. The voice was unmistakably Patty's, but harder than I remembered. Colder. "When do I get access to the money? I can't keep dodging these creditors much longer. They're starting to make threats." Another voice. Male. Probably her lawyer. "As soon as you have legal custody and the court approves the guardianship arrangement. $200,000 a year management fee, plus full discretionary access for the children's educational and living expenses." Good. Because I hate pretending to care about those kids. They don't even remember me. They look at me like I'm a stranger, which I guess I am. But they're my ticket out of this mess. I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. Those kids she was calling her ticket. I'd been to every parent-teacher conference, every doctor's appointment, every school play for 12 years. I'd held them when they were sick and cheered when they succeeded. The old man's going to fight. This, Patty's voice continued on the recording. Not for long. We've got enough dirt to bury him. The kidnapping charges, the witness statements about his threats. By the time we're done, he'll be lucky if he doesn't spend the rest of his life in prison. Victor stopped the recording. "Carl, she's planning to destroy you completely." This isn't just about getting custody. She wants to make sure you can never challenge her again. Can we use this recording in court? It's admissible. Jennifer was party to the conversation, so no wiretapping laws were broken. But Carl, you need a real lawyer, not some overworked public defender. You need someone who can fight back. I can't afford a real lawyer, Vic. Maybe you can't, but I know someone who might be interested in this case. Someone who hates seeing good people get screwed by the system. That lawyer turned out to be Patricia Martinez, a family court specialist who'd built her reputation defending grandparents' rights. She took one look at Victor's evidence and agreed to represent me pro bono. This is exactly the kind of case I got into law to fight, she said during our first meeting in the county jail conference room. Greedy parents using children as meal tickets while the people who actually raise them get thrown under the bus. Patricia worked fast. Within a week, she'd secured my release on my own recognizance, arguing that a 30-year police veteran with deep community ties wasn't a flight risk. Walking out of that jail after 2 weeks felt like stepping into sunlight after being buried alive. But the real work was just beginning. The trial was set for 6 weeks later. Patricia and Victor spent every day building our defense, interviewing neighbors, collecting school records, documenting 12 years of devoted parenting. They found teachers who remembered me at every parent conference, coaches who knew me from years of driving kids to practice, doctors who had dealt with me during midnight emergency room visits. Meanwhile, Patty's legal team was busy painting me as an unstable old man who'd manipulated his vulnerable daughter and stolen her children through threats and intimidation. They had witnesses, or at least people claiming to be witnesses, who said I'd made threatening phone calls and sent intimidating letters. All lies, but presented with the kind of polish that only money can buy. The morning of the trial, the courthouse steps were packed with reporters. Patty had turned this into a media circus, playing the role of the heartbroken mother fighting to save her children from a dangerous kidnapper. She looked perfect, of course, professional but vulnerable, strong but sympathetic. Every tear seemed calculated for maximum impact. I sat at the defense table in my best suit, the same one I'd worn to Margaret's funeral 15 years earlier, and watched Patty's lawyer present his opening argument. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," he began, his voice rich with practiced outrage. "This is a case about a young mother who made a mistake. A mother who, in a moment of desperation after losing her husband, trusted the wrong person with her most precious possessions, her children." He painted a picture of Patty as a victim, manipulated by a controlling father-in-law who used her grief and financial struggles to steal her children. He talked about the psychological damage caused by 12 years of separation, the brainwashing that had turned the children against their biological mother. When it was Patricia's turn, she stood up slowly and looked directly at the jury. "My client has been accused of kidnapping," she said simply. "But kidnapping requires taking someone against their will. These children weren't taken. They were abandoned. And for 12 years, Carl Thompson has been the only parent they've known." She presented our evidence methodically. Photos from 12 years of birthday parties, Christmas mornings, graduations, report cards showing steady academic progress, medical records proving Carl had been listed as emergency contact and guardian on every form, testimony from neighbors, teachers, coaches, all painting a picture of a devoted grandfather who'd stepped up when no one else would. But the real bombshell came when Patricia played Victor's recording. This conversation was recorded 3 weeks ago between the plaintiff and her attorney, Patricia announced, setting up the audio equipment. Patty's voice filled the courtroom. "I hate pretending to care about those kids. They don't even remember me. They look at me like I'm a stranger, which I guess I am. But they're my ticket out of this mess." The jury's faces changed. You could see it happening in real time. The shift from sympathy to disgust. Several jurors were staring at Patty with open revulsion, but Patricia wasn't done. "We also have evidence of the plaintiff's gambling addiction and financial desperation," she continued, presenting bank records showing $120,000 in debts to casinos and loan sharks. This isn't about love or maternal instincts. This is about money. $200,000 a year in management fees from a trust fund worth $8.5 million. Patty's lawyer objected, argued that the financial evidence was irrelevant, but the judge allowed it. The jury had heard enough to understand what this was really about. Then Bradley took the stand. My 17-year-old grandson looked directly at his mother and said the words that ended the case. She's lying about everything. She came to our house when Grandpa Carl was at work and tried to get us to sign papers saying he hurt us. When we wouldn't do it, she said she'd make sure we never saw him again. Bradley pulled out his phone, the same one I'd given him for emergencies, the same one I'd taught him to use to document everything, just like I'd learned in 30 years of police work. I recorded her, he said, his voice steady despite the weight of the moment. The recording was devastating. Patty's voice sharp and threatening. You kids don't understand what's at stake here. That old man has been filling your heads with lies about me. When I get custody, things are going to change. You're going to boarding school in Switzerland and you won't see him again. The courtroom erupted. Patty's lawyer was frantically whispering to his client, but it was too late. The jury had heard everything they needed to hear. Judge Martinez, no relation to my lawyer, listened to the entire recording twice. When it finished, he was quiet for a long moment, studying the custody papers on his desk. Ms. Thompson, he finally said, his voice heavy with disgust. I've been on this bench for 18 years. I've seen parents fight over custody for all kinds of reasons. But I've never seen someone abandon their children for 12 years and then return only when those children became worth millions of dollars. He looked at the papers again, then at Patty, then at me. Petition denied. Full custody is permanently awarded to Carl Thompson. Furthermore, Ms. Thompson, you are hereby barred from any contact with these children until they reach age 18 and can decide for themselves whether they want a relationship with you. Patty screamed, not a sad cry or a disappointed sob, but a rage-filled shriek that echoed off the courtroom walls. You can't do this. That money belongs to me. I'm their mother. You're their biological mother, the judge corrected coldly. Mr. Thompson is their father in every way that matters. These children will be far better off without your influence in their lives. Security had to drag her out, still screaming about the money she'd never get. 3 months later, I'm sitting around a campfire in Yellowstone National Park, watching Bradley teach Dennis how to properly roast a marshmallow while Linda reads a book by firelight. We're 2 weeks into a month-long road trip across the country in a comfortable RV that we bought with a small portion of the trust fund money, not because we needed it, but because we finally could. The kids are thriving. Bradley's been accepted to 3 good colleges with academic scholarships. Linda's talking about becoming a veterinarian. Dennis still wants to be a scientist, inspired by Uncle Victor's detective work. The trust fund is managed by a conservative investment firm now, safely locked away until each child turns 21. They'll have their educations paid for, money for houses when they're older, a real foundation for their adult lives. That's what their father Terry would have wanted. Patty, last I heard, she'd moved back in with her mother after declaring bankruptcy. Her law firm let her go when the gambling debts and court case became public. The loan sharks are still looking for her, but that's not my problem anymore. She calls sometimes, the kids' phones, my phone, even trying to reach them through school. But they don't want to talk to her. Can't say I blame them. She had 12 years to be their mother. She chose money and career instead. Now she gets to live with that choice. People ask me if I'm bitter about those 12 years, raising kids who weren't technically mine, spending money I didn't really have, giving up the quiet retirement I'd planned. I tell them they're missing the point entirely. Those kids weren't technically mine, but they became mine in every way that counted. Biology is just genetics. Family is choice, commitment, showing up every single day even when it's hard. I didn't lose 12 years of my life. I gained 3 children who loved me enough to fight for me, even when the whole world was watching and the legal system was stacked against us. That's worth more than all the oil money in Texas. As I watch my grandkids plan tomorrow's hike around this campfire, I know I made the right choice all those years ago. I'd make it again in a heartbeat. Because real family isn't about who gave birth to you. It's about who stays when times get tough. It's about who sacrifices for you, without being asked. It's about who loves you not, because they have to, but because they choose to, every single day. Blood may be thicker than water, but loyalty, real loyalty, is thicker than both. Sometimes the people who hurt you most are the ones who share your DNA, but the people who heal you are the ones who choose to stay when everyone else walks away. I learned that being a father isn't about biology or legal papers. It's about showing up every day for 12 years when nobody's watching, nobody's keeping score, and nobody's paying you to care.